Welcome to the Mind Body Podcast. I'm your host, Maria Angelova, and I'm here to challenge everything you have been taught about aging and wellness. This podcast is for those who refuse to accept that growing old means growing unhealthy. Each week, I will bring you dynamic conversations with inspirational guests, sharing practical advice, insights, and motivation to live your life rebelliously as you age with grace and vitality. This is your time to embrace self-care, transformation, and an infectious spirit that says no to the conventional and yes to a vibrant, powerful life. Let's dive in and redefine what it means to live well. Hi, Rebels, and welcome to the Mind Body Podcast, your rebellious podcast with me, your host, Maria, where it is all about a strong body, calm mind, healing, and fully living. And today, your special treat is Dr. Jeffrey Gurian, who is known as the Doctor of Happiness. And what better topic to talk about than when we talk about health, well-being, and aging well. Welcome to the show, Dr. Jeffrey. So glad to have you here.
Thank you so much, Maria. I'm so glad to be on with you, and I give you credit for doing what you do because it's very important to put positive energy out to the universe. That's always my goal, and I was very happy when you invited me to come on.
Well, thank you for saying yes. I appreciate it because you are definitely, I would say, a rebellious nature. And I want the audience to give me 3 words that describe who you are. I mean, you're also known as a Renaissance man because literally you do a lot of things. So tell us, if you can narrow it down to 3 words, what are 3 words that describe you? And give us a little bit of a backstory behind each word.
Rebellious seems to fit. I don't fall into a category, and I never have. I hate stereotypes. I hate when you can look at somebody and think you know all about them just by the way they present themselves. So I have an interesting backstory. When I was 12 years old, I already decided what I wanted to be. I knew I wanted to be a doctor because I wanted to do something to help people. And it's very strange for a 12-year-old to know what they want to be. But I was too sensitive to handle life and death situations. And I was wearing braces at the time. And I said, you know what? I'll be a dentist. And I'll make people look beautiful and help them to have a great smile. And I was already writing comedy. So my whole life has been that split. I'm the only doctor with a long-standing career in the comedy world, working with the biggest stars in the country, from Rodney Dangerfield and Joan Rivers and Andrew Dice Clay to the stars of today like Kevin Hart and Nick Kroll and John Mulaney, who had me open their Broadway show for them. So I have an eclectic background. I don't say that any of that to brag, believe me, one of the things I always teach people is to honor your strengths as well as your weaknesses.
Yeah.
I have many weaknesses that I'm very willing to admit, but it's also important to say what you're good at, because the universe gives us gifts, and if you get gifts, you're supposed to use them.
Yes, I love that.
And so the other words that might describe me are adventurous and fun and outgoing. You know, I love people. I go through life. My motto is, I love everyone until you teach me not to. I embrace everyone. I want to go out and give everyone a big hug, you know.
Yes.
But until you teach me not to, there's some people in the world that are very negative, and there's true evil in the world, and that's what spoils it for everybody. People all over the world, all they want is to be happy. In every country, no matter where you're from, you ask people what they want, and all they want is to be happy. And that means different things to different people.
You know, there is I say there is the human that unites us all, and every human being wants to be loved, respected, and enjoy life, right? It's as simple as that.
It's very simple. It's so simple. It's very simple. But some people make it very complicated.
Yes.
Very, very complicated. And after the last 4 years, so many people are stressed out. They're so stressed out. And that's why I admire what you do, because people need a positive message. They need a place to tune in where they hear things that will inspire them and strengthen them on an energetic level, on body, mind, and spirit.
Yeah, see, we're speaking the same language. I love that.
Absolutely.
So, Dr. Jeffrey, tell us, how do you go from oral surgery to comedian to talking about happiness. Tell us a little bit more about like your journey of what took you to this path of, preaching happiness and love and connection and bringing laughter and joy to the world.
When I was just a child, I was only 6 or 7 years old. I already knew that I could take away certain pain with my hands, which is very unusual for a child to know. My parents didn't know anything about it. I used to do it on my little sister. If she had pain, I would say, I'll take it away. And I'd put my hands on her and the pain would go away. And that just made sense to me. So as I grew up and I went into practice, the universe tends to put things in your path that are supposed to be there. And I was a cosmetic specialist, but I was getting a lot of people that got headaches, that got physical pain from stress. I don't know if you're familiar with TMJ.
Yes.
TMJ is the temporomandibular joint. It's the joint in front of your ears that allows you to open and close your mouth when you're speaking, when you're eating, anything like that. When people are stressed out, very often they tend to clench and grind their teeth. It's called bruxism. So after many years of practice as a cosmetic dentist, I became a clinical professor at NYU, New York University, in oral medicine and orofacial pain. And my specialty was TMJ because I've always been fascinated by the physical effects of stress. In 1999, I presented my concept to a Dr. Henry Grayson. Dr. Henry Grayson was the founder of the National Institute of the Psychotherapies, a very well-known psychotherapist. And I came to him and I said, if you're treating people who are emotionally disturbed, who are under stress, a lot of them are getting physical symptoms that you're not treating. You're treating the mind, but you're not treating the body. You're not treating the spirit. And he created something called the Association for Spirituality and Psychotherapy. And I spent 20 years on the board. He accepted my work. I said, if you're treating people with emotional illness, you have to ask them questions. When you wake up in the morning, does your neck hurt? Do you have shoulder pain and back pain? Because people don't know that the muscles from the jaw attach into the head, and back, and down into the shoulders. So if you wake up in the morning and your neck hurts, Maria, the last person in the world you would ever tell would be your dentist. Why would you ever tell your dentist that your neck hurts? It wouldn't occur to you to do that. And if dentists don't ask, it goes undiagnosed. So I wound up lecturing to psychologists on their own field. They brought me on the board, and I wound up lecturing at what are called energy psychology conferences in this country and also in Canada, talking about thought, stress, mindset, how to change negative thinking to positive thinking. And all the time I was doing that, I was writing comedy for big stars. It's a crazy life. I couldn't decide what to do. So my nurse in my office had strict instructions, never interrupt me with a patient unless it's for show business. She would come in and she'd say, Dr. Rivers is on the phone if Joan Rivers called me, or, Dr. Lewis is calling if Jerry Lewis called me, or Richard Lewis from Curb Your Enthusiasm. The only one no one believed was Dr. Dangerfield. No one ever believed there could be a Dr. Dangerfield. But I was doing both things. I was making people beautiful and I was making people laugh at the same time. And I couldn't decide which one, so I wound up doing both. Which is a crazy life. It got me a lot of press, and that's how I became known as the Doctor of Happiness, because I do a lot of radio. I'm on WABC radio very often, talking about all the things that we're going to be talking about today, but mostly about happiness and mindset and how to change your thinking from negative thinking to positive thinking.
There's so much that you're talking about, Dr. Jeffrey, that I can relate to because I personally have gone through a tremendous mindset shift. And I personally have gone from being a very highly stressed, anxious person with anxiety attacks and all of that to somebody who is very responsive to life and embraces life the way it is. And the work that I do, I work actually with the physical and the mental, the body and the mind. And when I first started my entrepreneurship, I started purely with the physical. I was like a fitness studio. But then as I started seeing how people's movement patterns change and like how pain was showing up when I was asking more questions, I would find an emotional aspect. I would find a mental aspect to it. And I now talk a lot about pain and how pain is the whole body, mind, and spirit, right? It's the whole person. It's not just one thing. And I will tell you something interesting that you brought up is I was in a car accident and I had a whiplash. And when I went to my desk, actually my entire family back home is dentists. I had a shift in my like bite.
In your jaw.
Yeah, my teeth were not aligned. And because I do a lot of alignment work, I could, reset the way my jaw was. But to the point that you make, sometimes you don't think about things like that unless you're really paying attention to them.
Yes, exactly.
So I totally agree with what you're talking about. And I personally have seen firsthand the impact of, like my husband sometimes laughs, like putting the pink eyeglasses, sunglasses on. And I'm like, yep, life is a lot more fun when you have those sunglasses on, right? So
Right. You said so many important things. I just want to touch on that.
Please.
That, about changing your thought. People don't know that they can change their thought. And we created all of our thoughts. And what's interesting to me is that one of the lectures that I do is called Don't Believe Your Thoughts, which can sound strange to people. But we created all of our thoughts, and a lot of our thoughts are not valid for us. They're thoughts that were given to us very often when we're children by people who may not have had our best interests at heart, sometimes even from parents. Not everybody grew up in a supportive household where they were told, you'll be successful, you could do anything you want. When I was 6 or 7 years old, I started stuttering. And I stuttered through my 20s and beyond. Even after I was a doctor in my 30s, I was blocking on certain words. And I realized one day that I didn't stutter when I was alone. I only stuttered when I was trying to talk to somebody else. And I really consider it grace. I was given the grace to figure out you can't have a disability based on your location. If a man has a limp, he limps in every room of his house. Yeah, he can't go into a room and close the door and walk perfectly. But if I could go into a room and speak perfectly, like I could never say Gurian. Most stutterers can't say their own name. They stutter very badly on their own name. And what makes sense to me is, well, first, you'll see, not only don't I stutter anymore, but you can't even shut me up. I have a lot to say. I talk a lot because I'm so glad that I don't stutter. But I realized that there was nothing wrong with me. And that started my journey. When I went to college, I made myself run for the president of the freshman class. And it was a huge school. It was fed into by 7 different high schools. I didn't know anybody except the kids from my high school. And I couldn't say my name. And I told myself, if I could win the election, I wouldn't have to stutter anymore. And so I had other kids introduce me to kids I didn't know because I couldn't say Gurian. So they'd say, this is Jeffrey Gurian. He's running for president. You should vote for this kid. Anyway, I won the election. I was the president of the whole freshman class of Hunter College, and I still stuttered, and it was a great lesson for me. It taught me that outside validation doesn't work. It doesn't matter how many people compliment you and tell you you're gorgeous and talented and funny and whatever. It matters what you think of yourself. And that started my journey on understanding that I was holding thoughts that were not valid for me. It's so much a bigger story than stuttering, as you can see. So I conquered stuttering, and now as an avocation, I work with stutterers all over the world, and I teach them how not to stutter. And the criterion is if you can speak better when you're by yourself, then it means that there's really nothing wrong with you, because you can't change your disability by who's in the room with you or where you are at the time. And so that started my journey on thought, on learning that I could literally change my mind. And that's what led, years later, that's what led to my first happiness book, Healing Your Heart by Changing Your Mind. That's why I wrote the Changing Your Mind part, a spiritual and humorous approach to achieving happiness, learning how to take a negative and turn it into a positive, and learning that we're all given obstacles in life. Every single person has something about themselves that they would change if they could. Some of the things we can't change. Are you familiar with the Serenity Prayer?
Not the serenity prayer, no.
The serenity prayer is very simple. It's grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change.
Oh, cannot change. Yes. Okay.
The,
Yes.
the courage to change the things I can,
Mm-hmm.
and the wisdom to know the difference. That's the most important line. The wisdom to know the difference. There are some things we can't change. That's where acceptance comes in. Some things you must accept about yourself. If you don't do that, you'll never be happy. You have to accept who you are. But there are certain things that we can change. Like I'm fascinated by people who lose 100 pounds. To me, that is amazing. What a dedication it takes for people to literally change their lives that way. So for me, my story is simple. I mean, stuttering is very difficult to conquer, and it took me many years to do that. But now I use my voice in everything I do. Well, I'm a motivational speaker, I'm on the radio, and I'm always listening to myself. I listen, and I'm grateful every day that I don't stutter. I never forget it. I talk about it a lot because it's a message to people.
It's part of your story, and it's an
Whatever
inspiration.
that's what I hope, that it's
Yeah.
an inspiration for people to overcome their own obstacles.
You know, you bring up so many great points. And the one thing I really like that you started with is that the thoughts that we have, we don't even know how they have come into our head, right? They have come through our history.
Right.
And I mean, I would say you, when I coach people, they're like, why is nobody teaching us that? And I'm like, that's a great
Right.
question. But
Exactly.
even when I started my journey, you know, I had my own journey and my own obstacles, and I was like, I'm missing something, like, right? And it was the mindset piece. And it was nobody else but my mindset and the thoughts I had put into my head. But I wasn't even aware that there is an option to think differently, because you think the same way your whole life. Everybody around you thinks the same way. So they
Right.
reinforce what you think, right? And then when you start becoming rebellious, people are like, oh, what are you doing? You know, because now it doesn't make sense to them. It makes sense to you.
Right.
And I think that's a big message, to know that just because you think one way does not mean that's the way. And I love, I call it knowing your truth, because it's what a lot of times we are taught by our community or parents or guardians or whoever raised us. I mean, even parents, even the best meaning parents, they teach you what they know, right? And that's all that they know.
And that's what I always say, that your thoughts are not based on your experience, they're based on your interpretation of your experience. So
The meaning.
it's the reason why you could have siblings that are completely different people. And if you ask them about their childhood, you'd think they had different parents, because their interpretation of what happened is so different.
Well,
And
you know,
fascinating. No, it's just fascinating to me. And I'm so happy that you talk about that, because it's so real. And people need to know that. But it's very hard to objectively look at your thoughts. You have to realize that some of your thoughts were given to you. If you were ever bullied as a child, you don't like to hear what those people said, but on some level, we wonder if it's true.
Because it gets into your head.
Things. And that's why I call them heart wounds. From the time we're children, every time someone hurts your feelings, or breaks a promise to you, or breaks up in a relationship with you, or does anything to hurt your feelings, it stays lodged inside of our heart chakra, and I call them heart wounds. And that's why that book is called Healing Your Heart by Changing Your Mind. It's not about heart disease. It's about the energetic effect. Because when you talked about pain, you know, there's always two reasons for pain. There's a physical reason, and then there's an energetic reason. And the energetic reason is that something that happened to you from your past is still lodged inside of you. If you were dating somebody on 13th Street and you broke up and it was a very sad breakup, every time you go near 13th Street, you're going to feel it inside your body. Cellular memory is something I talk about a lot. All these events are trapped inside of us, and you have to work to release them so that they don't have power over you anymore, because otherwise we're victims of those past experiences.
And I love that. And you know, Dr. Jeffrey, I talk about that in the context of aligning our body, mind, and spirit, because you can change your mind, but if the emotional wound is still into the body and the body is still experiencing, right? You can say, well, okay, I'm forgetting that relationship. It's a thing of the past. But if every time you go on the street, your body is like, ooh, I feel that heaviness, and it's still that emotion, And that experience and that chemistry is still into the body. You have to, like you said, you have to release it from the body so that the chemical dependency is no longer there.
Exactly. And you know what, too? Our negative messages very often come from our subconscious mind. What that little voice inside of you that tells you that you'll never be successful, you'll never achieve your goals, you're wasting your time, don't bother because you're not going to make it happen. What I teach people is make that voice a whisper. If you were in a crowd and somebody was whispering to you, there's a good chance that you wouldn't hear what they were saying. That's what you have to do with your subconscious mind, with those negative messages. You have to work on making them a whisper so that you can ignore them. Very often, I'll say to myself, shut up. Stop thinking that. Because, if I'm going to go out on stage and perform to a big audience or whatever, there's always that anxiety. That little voice is always still there that tells you, it always tells you, oh, you're not enough, And so it's so important for your audience to know that because they get these messages. You're not young enough. You're not slim enough. You're not talented enough. You're not this. And then it's not true. Those things are not true. And you can't validate them. You have to say, shut up to that part of your mind. You make it into a whisper so you can ignore it.
Hey, Rebels. I want to take a quick moment to share something super exciting with you. If you've been feeling stuck, disconnected, or just know there is more to life than what you're experiencing, I have something special for you. I have created a powerful 6-step video series called Unleash Your Potential, an introduction to the Angelova Method. As a valued mind-body podcast listener, the series is my gift to you. In this series, I will guide you through the core elements of the Angelova Method, a unique approach that integrates movement, mindset, and mastery to help you align your body, mind, and life. You will learn practical techniques to improve your alignment, boost your core strength, and connect deeply to your inner self. Whether you're looking to enhance your physical health, gain mental clarity, or simply live more fully, these videos are designed to get you started on the path to your most vibrant self. And the best part? It's completely free. So if you're ready to break through barriers and unleash your full potential, head over to mindbodyexpert.com and get started today. Let's take this journey together because you, my rebel, deserve nothing less than the extraordinary.
I see you.
I talk to my clients.
I see you get. Yeah.
Yes, because I teach my clients. I tell them you can talk to yourself and talk yourself out of it, right? When those messages come and you become aware. And the client was telling me her husband walked in and she was not aware he was there. He was like, honey, he's like, are you okay? Who are you talking to? And she was like, I was in the midst of a conversation with myself. And she's like, but yes, I do think that. And I'll tell you one of the questions that maybe that will help somebody align. One of the questions I ask myself when I become aware that I'm triggered or that I'm becoming reactive, I ask myself, is this worth my energy? Like the way that I'm thinking right now, the way that I call it going down the rabbit hole, is this worth my energy? Because the smallest things happens. And then what do? You start, that somehow becomes a big deal. And suddenly you remember all the things you have ever done wrong and how you did, right? And it becomes from that little thing to that big thing now that you're like, well, I just don't want to do anything because I never do anything right. And that keeps us stuck versus moving forward.
Right, especially if you're a perfectionist. I was trained to be a perfectionist. I came from a loving and supportive family, but my mom was a perfectionist. And I remember saying to her, she would dress. I was the only kid in college with a neat army jacket. Everybody else, I always said to her, why do you dress me that way and comb my hair? And she said, because I want you to be perfect. Oh. And years later, I reminded her of that. She goes, I never said it. And I said, you know what? I'll never forget it. You said that to me. No one could be perfect, but it's a lot of pressure to try to live up to. And you're a doctor and you're treating patients. You really have to strive for perfection, knowing that you'll settle for a little bit less because there's nothing that's perfect. But especially when you're a cosmetic dentist, if you're filing down somebody's front teeth, you better know what to do to make them look beautiful again, because otherwise you're in the wrong field. So you have to have a lot of confidence. And conquering stuttering has given me a lot of confidence. I feel people tell me that they feel that from me. Even when I'm feeling nervous and anxious about something, people say, because I've trained myself, people say that they can feel a sense of confidence from me. And that's very interesting. People are very sensitive to energy. And I talk about that a lot too. Sensitivity is a great strength, it's not a weakness. And I didn't know that because I'm an empath. So there were times in my life, and I'm sure you are too. I can tell just from being in your presence. There were times in my life, if I was with you and you were sad, I was sadder for you than you were. I overfelt my feelings, which made me withdraw, which made it look like I didn't care, when the truth was I cared too much. I cared so much that it was overwhelming to me.
Yeah.
You know? And I talk about that because a lot of people are drawn towards alcohol and drugs to lessen that feeling because the feelings are too intense. And I read an article recently that 77% of
I
people
can read it. What does it say? At the end of the what? What does it say?
it says 77% of Americans are engaging in addictive behavior
Wow.
to cope with mental health issues.
Wow.
77%. That's an awful lot of people dealing with stress.
Yeah. Well, it's really not dealing with stress. It's really trying to avoid dealing with stress.
Yes, absolutely. Trying to avoid and not wanting to feel the feelings because it's not easy to feel the feelings.
Yeah.
But it's very important in terms of raising your level of consciousness to understand that those things are just temporary. Alcohol and drugs are hurting a lot of people. And not to go off on a tangent, but honor your sensitivity. Women especially, our society gives them the wrong message. It's always telling women that they're too sensitive. And you know what? You're exactly as sensitive as you're supposed to be. And if more people were sensitive, it would be a much kinder world. People will be much nicer to each other.
Well, I think you make a very great point that we kind of go to the extremes, right? Either too sensitive or don't sensitive. It's like, what if we just respect each other to where we are, right? And
Simple.
I think that goes
Very simple.
exactly to the way the conversation started, right? Each one of us is different. Each one of us has a different upbringing. Each one of us has different value because of our experiences, the way we grew up. Each one of us sees things differently and assigns meaning to things because of our subconscious. And if we're just more, I always tell people, if you stay curious about people and instead of judging them, give them an opportunity to share their story, to tell you about who they are. And instead of judging them, you embrace them for the difference that they are. I really think that's the game. That could be the game changer of the world. Until we point fingers at each other and blame each other and choose to see our differences in terms of what unites us as humans, things are not working out so great for us as a world right now.
Exactly. That's so well put. There's too much divisiveness.
Yeah, way too much divisiveness.
It should be very simple. Like I said, I go through life. I love everyone until they teach me not to. That's just how I approach things, and I just love talking about this kind of stuff. I think it's so important for people to know that there's a different way, that there are possibilities.
Yes.
If you feel like you're stuck, there's ways to change it and to learn that you can change your thoughts. You're not locked in. I used to think if you think one thing, you have to think that for your whole life.
Yeah.
I used to have a big mustache. I thought I'll have a mustache for my whole life. I didn't realize I could shave it off.
That's a great example. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like it better, a long time ago. But all my old pictures, I have walls of pictures. I have met people in my life that I never expected to meet. And people say, how did you know all these people? I have in my home, I have like a comedy museum. First of all, my home is filled with balloons and crayons and toys.
Oh, wow.
My children are grown up, but I do this for me because when I lecture, I talk about how important it is to stay connected to your inner child. Yes. Inside of you is little Maria. She's still there, and she needs to know that she's safe, and she needs to know that she's taken care of. So little Jeffrey is my best friend. My inner child is my best friend. And I teach people to create their own happiness center. And your happiness center is where you live. Because once you leave the house, you're at the mercy of whatever the universe has in store for you. You have no control over what happens once you leave the house. The crazy thought, every time you go either left or right, your whole life is going to be different. When you walk out of your house, you go left or right, your whole life is going to be different. But you can't overthink it. You go, whichever way you go is the way you're supposed to go. Right? And so in your home, you should surround yourself with things that make you happy wherever you see them. Like, I need brightness. So I have white carpeting. As crazy as that is in New York City, I have white carpeting. My piano is white. My furniture is white. My car is white. And then I have bright things, flowers and plants and pictures all over of my children and people that have meaning to me, so that wherever I look is something that makes me smile.
I love that.
And
that is such great advice.
It's one of the chapters in my book, How to Create Your Own Happiness Center. And
I like that.
It tells people what to do. Because some people live in dark apartments and they wonder why they're sad. They don't get enough light. We're like plants. We need water and we need light. You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, that's why I preach a lot, like being outdoors and getting sunlight, because the lifestyle that we live today, I mean, some days you don't even have to see the sunlight, right? Many people work from home, they're in front of the computer, they have the artificial light in front, right? You don't even have, and we need that. Like, we need it for our survival. It's actually a basic human need. We need fresh air, we need sunshine, we need all of those things are basic.
Right.
And you know what else I really like, Dr. Jeffrey, is the ambience of where you are. I firmly believe in that. For example, clutter is something that really stresses me out, and I can literally feel how it affects my energy. So I need things to be clean and nice and neat. And then the other thing that you brought up is, I really like that you talked about the inner child, because I think as we grow up, we become so boxed into, like, this is how you should behave, this is what you should say, this is what you should not say. All of these rules and regulations that really take away from who we authentically are. And I will tell you something, at like 47, I've always been very playful, always been like flirty and like silly. And, you know, people are like, don't do that. That's inappropriate. And I'm trying to fit in, but that's not me, you know?
But that's why you look so young.
Thank you.
Seriously, I would have thought much younger. And it's the truth. It affects how we feel. Like, I never talk about age. Age is so hypothetical.
It's a number. Yeah.
We're all just boys and girls, the way I look at it. And it's amazing to me that people think just because you get older that you're supposed to act a certain way, you know, just because you have a serious job. Look, I had a very serious job working at NYU, working in my office on patients. People come in pain. They're nervous. You know how many people fear going to the dentist, and most of the time it's something that happened when they were children, because a lot of dentists had no business working on children. They didn't have the personality to work on children, and they did anyway. And it hurt a lot of children, and it made for bad adult patients. You know, when I used to work, my goal was painless injections. So a patient would say to me, are you going to give me an injection? And I'm like, I already did. And that would be such an amazing thing, because if you hurt somebody with an injection, they're nervous for the whole visit. They're waiting for more pain. If you can give somebody an injection and they don't feel it at all, now they're calm and they trust you. And that's very important. That's another thing that I talk about. I once went to a lecture. A dentist said, don't use topical anesthetic on children because it's good for them to feel a little pain. And I was outraged. I jumped up and I said, when you go to the dentist, do you want to feel a little pain? That's such terrible advice. You should never hurt a child.
So I do have to tell you, because you would appreciate this. So I come from Eastern Europe, and in Eastern Europe, we're not about convenience and feeling good. We're all about, like, get the way, right?
Right, so, which is even more amazing that you changed that. That's even more
right?
amazing.
Yeah, that's a whole other episode that we can do. But I literally, when we were kids, I was not given anesthesia, and I absolutely dread it. And, you know, my dentists were my family. But I would absolutely, because it was like the pain that's going to come because, you know, there's no injection and all of that. And, Yeah, I mean, it traumatizes you as a kid. And
Of
I took
course.
my daughter to the dentist, and she's just like lying down, opening her mouth, and I'm like, like, I mean, right? You start paying attention, and you're like, wow, she doesn't have any prior experience, and she's just like opening her mouth, right? She's not
Exactly.
anticipating the pain, and
Right.
her body is not tensing.
And your prior experience is exactly what I was talking about.
Yeah,
Cellular memory.
level, yeah,
It's trapped inside of you. You have
yeah.
no control. And when you see dental things, it's a trigger.
Mhm.
And it reminds you of what happened. And
Yes.
a dentist in Eastern Europe, that sounds like a scary prospect to me. I don't think I would want to go there. But it's
Well,
very,
they have gone a long way into using anesthesia and all of that. But back
no,
in
I'm
my
sure.
day, it was a different time. So I just had
No,
to share that because I thought that was funny. Well,
no,
let's start to
but it's
wrap
very,
up.
but it's also, I just want to say it's very interesting to overcome your sociology
Yeah. Mhm.
when you're raised in a certain country. When I went to LifeSpring, I'll tell you this brief story. It's a weekend of experiential stuff. You're with people from all different countries all over the world. By the end of the weekend, you're hugging guys from all other countries. Everybody's hugging and everybody feels very close. There was a man stood up from Japan, and he said when he grew up, his parents never hugged him, and
Aw.
he had tears in his eyes. He said in their society, they're not very emotional.
Emotional. Yeah.
And after this weekend, it created such a change that he couldn't wait to get home and see his kids and give them a big hug. And he had tears running down his face. And that was so touching to me because for someone to overcome their sociology is so much harder for somebody to overcome the way you were raised.
Yeah.
But it's very important to know that there are options, that you don't have to stay the same way, that you can
Absolutely.
change. And that's a very
Absolutely.
important message. So I give you credit for overcoming that because when you come
Thank
from
you.
that in your childhood, people
Yeah.
think they have to stay that way. And
Yeah.
so that's amazing.
It's possible. And I am telling you, I'm a personal testament that
Right.
I know that change is possible. It's a process. It's not an overnight change.
Oh, everything is a
Over
process.
time. Yeah. So let's start wrapping up. Dr. Jeffrey, tell people you have, I think, 8 books, right? In
I have,
total?
I have 8 books, 5 on comedy and 3 on happiness, but it's the ones on happiness that I want to stress that they're all available on Amazon. The first and they all became bestsellers. So if you
Congrats.
can see the picture, healing your heart by changing your mind, a meditating dog on an orange pillow. Uh,
Yeah.
have you any idea how hard it is to get a dog to sit in lotus position? Very difficult. But but dogs are magical. Dog is God spelled backwards, by the way, and
Oh, I've never thought about that.
a lot of people haven't. Yeah, and it's a very it. I think it's the reason why people are so drawn to dogs, and they always say a dog is a man's best friend. Um,
Mm,
it's all about what we talked about: how to change your thinking, how to take a negative and change it into a positive.
positive.
My second happiness book is called "Fight the Fear: Overcoming Obstacles That Stand in Your Way," because
Mhm.
I've been battling fear all my life, and I don't know why. I was never taught the world was a safe place, but I never let it stop me. I have fears of traveling. So in 2019, I made myself go to Japan all alone because I always wanted to go to Japan. And it was the scariest thing I could think of to go by myself. And I have fears of getting lost. I was lost every single day in Japan, but I did it. I performed in 2 comedy shows while I was there. I traveled to every city. I was lost every single day, but I proved to
Congrats.
myself that I can do it because I never let fear stop me. And while I was recovering from COVID, March of 2020, New York City was the epicenter of COVID, the
Mhm.
worst. Well, as you can tell, I'm a trendsetter. I went right out and got it. I don't want to wait. I got COVID immediately, and
You were on top.
I wound up with COVID double pneumonia. I was in the hospital. I laugh about it now, but it was very, very serious. I was really, really sick. And I was home for months recovering. And because I like to change a negative into a positive, I wrote my third happiness book. And it's called Facing Adversity: Stories of Courage and Inspiration. And it's true stories. I 20 years ago, more than in 1999, I started cutting out articles from newspapers and magazines of people that overcame tremendous difficulties in their lives, because I've always been fascinated by that. Like I said before, we're all given obstacles. Some people are crushed by them. They live in depression. They can't do anything. Other people draw on some inner strength and they overcome their obstacles. And I'm fascinated by that. Tell you a quick story. A little 3-year-old boy was playing hide and seek. He hid behind a tractor. The tractor was running, put his hands in, and it cut off his hands. And his father was a surgeon, and he saw it happen, and he raced the little boy to the hospital. But he wasn't that kind of surgeon. He wasn't a transplant surgeon. He was a heart surgeon. He never did that kind of surgery, but it was a holiday and there were no transplant surgeons, and the father had to do the surgery himself. He assembled a team of people, reattached his son's hands, put them in casts. After 3 months, they took off the cast. The hands were alive, but they weren't functional. The grandfather was a martial artist who trained that little boy every day growing up. And today, that little boy is a famous spinal surgeon. And he's the head of surgery at a hospital in Colorado.
Wow.
That story blew me away. I use it as an example. I've done surgery. I know what a steady hand you have to have. To do spinal surgery is the most complicated. And this young man who had lost his hands is a famous spinal surgeon. That's the kind of stories that are in this book and the kind of people,
adversity.
the kind of people that I admire. So all those books are available on Amazon. If you just look under Jeffrey Gurian, they're all there. My website is comedymatterstv.com. It's mostly comedy, but there's a separate column on spirituality and healing, on stuttering, on all different kinds of things that we spoke about.
Yeah.
And on Instagram, if you're on Instagram, I'm very big on Instagram, at Jeffrey Gurian, Gurian, at Jeffrey, and spell Jeffrey right, Jeffrey.
And we're going to make sure that we share all of the links in the posting of the episode so that people can click on them and subscribe and follow you. So yeah, thank you.
That's
Dr.
so great.
Jeffrey, what a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for being here for us. Rebels, I do hope that you're equally inspired and really reflecting on the conversation, because yes, this is a fun, light conversation, but there is a lot of profoundness and depth into this conversation. And this is the type of stuff that is really going to change your life if you open your mind to it, get curious, and really take the action to make those changes. So Dr. Jeffrey, thank you so much. You guys, let us know if you have any kind of questions, share, comment, and above all, don't forget to stay rebellious. Dr. Jeffrey, thank you so much for being here.
And thank you, Maria, for having me. And if anybody has any questions, I never mind if they email me. It's jeffrey@jeffreygurian.com. I welcome that. And I thank you so much for the work that you do and for having me on as your guest. I really appreciate it.
I do too.
Happy New Year to everybody.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Thank you for joining us on the Mind Body Podcast, where we explore the power of living authentically and rebelliously. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a fellow rebellious soul who would love to hear what we share as much as you do. Stay strong, stay calm, and most importantly, stay rebellious. Until next time, rebellious souls, keep living fully. Your journey is just beginning.